Hey everyone, we just recorded a fantastic episode on how to close deals. And but after we recorded the episode, we realized that I had actually messed up, and the microphones that were recording the audio weren't actually working for some inane technical reason. So, what do we do? What we did is our team took the audio from the cameras and then using AI and elbow grease have tried to get it into a form as good as possible because we didn't want to re-record it. We thought there was a lot of great moments and energy in the room that we wanted to get across to you. So for this week alone, it's a fun episode. Maybe not the best audio, but I think you will enjoy this. So
We're going to use the word deal to mean any sort of broad transaction. This is maybe the most important part of any deal making.
When the timing is right, stop doing that relationship building and get to closing the deal.
If Facebook can buy WhatsApp, if that can happen over 10 days, you can close a hire within 10 days.
In case of fundraising or in case of closing a candidate, in case of any deal, this overt interest really does make you feel like, wow, they seem desperate. I wonder what's wrong. I think the person who's able to keep it together and control their emotions as much as possible is the one who's going to win. Keep your shit together.
Hey everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of the Aarthi and Sriram show. Now, last week, for those of you who watch every single week, we talked about hiring, especially around how to close a great candidate. And part of this was about how do you actually close, and by which we mean how do you actually get that candidate over the line. Right. And this is a topic which we think is applicable to so many different parts of life. Yeah. It's applicable to partnerships, it's applicable to closing great candidates, it's applicable to renting a house. How do you get a transaction with someone else going and then negotiate it and then use all of the psychological business maneuvers that you have at your disposal to actually get it signed and then done. And what we want
These I think even I've used as part of fundraising, for example, being able to close a deal, because there's such a dance to it and it's a long process. And it is a process. So I've even had to use some of these as a firm doer myself.
Yeah, there you go. And so this could be any kind of transaction. And we're going to use the word deal in this episode to mean any sort of broad transaction for at the cost of repeating myself. Could be closing a great hire. It could be getting a fundraise done. It could be getting a acquisition done, either if you are the buyer or the seller, which you're trying to sell your company. Mm-hmm. It could be pretty much anything in life where there's some sort of a process where you're trying to get somebody else to sign something with you. And these kind of like lessons that we all learned over the years. And if you work with one of us, you will find us applying it in some shape or form. So we're going to try and maybe take some terms and go over this. I think the first thing I would say is, if you think about any one of these deals, transactions, these are long-term engagements. To pick examples, if you are a great CEO, you want to hire a fantastic engineer, a fantastic executive, a fantastic senior salesperson. You don't just email somebody and say, hey, come in for an interview. It doesn't work that way. The best people are already in a great job, or they are doing something else that they're maybe happy with. So this is a long-term dating process, flirtation process. Yes. And the first thing I would tell people is, if you want to get anything done, you have to start building relationships with the people on the other side way before you actually need the
thing done. Yes, exactly. I think we talked about this briefly in our previous episode as well. One mistake that we see people do, especially in the context of hiring people, is to sort of swoop in last minute and be like, I have this problem. You would be the great person to go fix this problem. Can you come work here? Or can you come do this? And it could be in the context of hiring or anything else, but that just doesn't work. Some of these you just have to like put in the time and put in the effort a long time before you sort of see it coming. And it is also much more authentic to both sides, where you're just basically reaching out when you're not in the point of where it is like transactional. And I think it really, really helps to just start paving the ground for it and doing this very early on, especially if you're a startup founder. You know, at some point, as your company scales, you aren't going to need that particular head of sales or CTO or whichever role, but start laying out the foundation for that early and not be at the point where closed our Series A or closed our Series B. Now I have to go hire a CTO. And, you know, if that works and you get a recruiter and stuff, that's fine. But what I've really seen work is founders really start to put in the work very early on, even when they don't really need that person right at this point.
That's a good example of this. I'm not sure the story has been told, but it's, I guess, like over a decade old now, is when Facebook acquired WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And one of the things that had it happened for many years before, is Mark Zuckerberg had been building a relationship with Jan Koum and I think Brian Acton at the time, and they had friendly ties. They kind of knew each other. And the reason this is important is one of the ways the acquisition, like I think, went down was, I think some of this may be public. One of the ways the acquisition went down is they had, I think, an overture from Google to buy the company, WhatsApp did. And if I know the story correctly, it's been a while, two things. One was that I think Mark had told the WhatsApp founders that, hey, if at any point in time you are approached or you want to think of selling the company, come talk to me. But I think the underlying thing, which is maybe more important, is that he had built up enough trust and the relationship with them that when something went wrong on the Google side of things, Mark was able to swoop in. And if I remember, that whole deal, which was maybe one of the largest in the history of technology, happened over a 10-day period over the Christmas holidays one night. And I think so. There's a couple of things to point out here. One is that if you want a deal you want a great job, you want to hire somebody, you want to sell your company, buy a company, the only n number of great candidates and people that you really want to work with. So you're building relationships with all of them. I think the second key part of this is timing, where you never know when the world is going to conspire to offer you an opportunity to do something. And so in the WhatsApp case, it was somebody else, I think Google and Instagram an offer or something happened where Google had done something and that made an acquisition conversation happen. Yeah. But this could happen in a number of ways. For example, you might be trying to hire a fantastic engineer, maybe a brilliant one, right? Let's say you're an AI company, this person's one of the best and LLM research or whatever the case may be. And they're happy, except maybe at one time, they had a really bad month at the job. Maybe, the manager, passed them off for promotion or something happened politically inside the company. Now, that is your moment to swoop in.
Yeah.
But it only works if two things. One, you put in the work for a long time before and you are ready to move quickly.
Yeah. You can't control the manager not doing right by this person, but what you can control is that relationship that you set up with this person. And also, I mean, in the WhatsApp case, I'm presuming for a founder sitting on the other side of the fence, right? Having a backup like Zuckerberg, like Facebook, to be able to talk to gives them so much psychological safety and advantage to be able to walk into the room with Google, right? To be able to say, well, if not you, I have somebody else who also wants me. And I think it works out both ways because for that founder sitting in that room, they don't feel like they have no leverage in this process. So net, Zuckerberg having that kind of a relationship with the WhatsApp founders is actually beneficial on both sides of the equation.
Yeah. I think there's another key part here, which is you have to be, just to role play Zuckerberg here a little bit, you have to know when there is an opportunity and you have to be willing to move quickly. Right. Because then if the opportunity closes, it may never come up again. Yeah. And this happens in many number of ways. Just use another acquisition example. This one I was involved in, where there was a period of time in 2012, 2014 in ad tech when these things called SSPs, were kind of a big deal. Not really important now, and they kind of are on maybe different formats. But the idea was that they kind of consolidated inventory from the publisher side, and they offered sort of a unified interface. But the interesting thing was, at the time, a lot of them weren't owned by the tech platforms. They were these independent companies like Mopa, LiveRail, which I'll come to. And what was happening was a lot of them, I think, were really interested in getting bought. But the companies weren't particularly there in terms of wanting to buy them. But there are sequence things what are happening, which is one was, I think Google made an acquisition, and then Twitter at the time bought this company Mopa, right? And we at Facebook had already built a relationship with this company LiveRail. And we were like, okay, well, there are only n number of these companies. If they are being bought, we need to move in, right? So this is actually interesting in both directions. Like, so for these founders, right, like I think that everyone who wound up selling in that era got a great exit. Yeah. Everyone who didn't, when the music stopped and somebody said, when they're handing out cookies, you better take one. But once you start handing out cookies, like they were really stuck with the bad business, because what happened is all the platforms had one, and they had their bet, and that was it. So the CEOs, and I think the Mopa CEOs did a great job of this. LiveRail CEO Bhagat did a great job of this. They were like, they had built relationships and they positioned themselves so they could be bought when the timing was right. So anyway, so I kind of belabor the point on deals, but one, the relationship beforehand, and second, timing and knowing when there is an opportunity is super important.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay, next up, I would say this is maybe the most important part of any deal making. We just rented a house and, Aarthi, you get emails and texts from me, saying this, as if we're doing an in-house podcast, which is the speed of the deal is everything.
Yeah.
The speed of the deal is everything, and the reverse of this, you heard this slowness just kills deals.
Yes.
And what does this mean? This means that when you're entering into any sort of a process, hey, maybe you're just joining us. Let's have a conversation, right? Or, hey, I want to rent this house, but the other people also want to rent this house. How do we get this house? Or I want to buy anyone, you pick anything in life, right? Your job, either on the buyer side or the seller side, any side of the transaction, is to make it happen as quickly as possible. Ideally within 28 hours, 72 hours, as soon as possible. Nothing, and I would say if it ever drags on for weeks or months, it just dies, right? And the reason for this is that there is usually a confluence of events and energy which make a deal happen. Somebody's very interested. There is a market force, right? Somebody wants a house. Somebody's having a shitty time with their manager. Those things move on. Things change. So if you haven't locked it in by this time, because you are trying to move something from one paradigm to a new paradigm, right? The universe resists. The universe wants to bring it back to status quo. So if you don't do it quickly, something else will change and your deal will just die.
Yeah, this sounds a bit contradictory to our previous point, but it's actually not. The previous point where we are like, start early, take the time to build the relationship and all of that. But when the timing is right, stop doing that relationship building and get to closing the deal.
Yeah.
Like you need to know when to basically switch from phase 1 into phase 2. And it is a direct transition, right? Like you have to know that this is the time. This is where you need to take action. This is where you need to close the deal. This is not the time to have yet another coffee meeting with an engineer and sort of be like, I wonder how things are at your end. And, sort of like do the niceties.
Yes.
This is the time and that person's telling you, I just went through this like performance cycle. I just don't think I'm getting what I'm looking for. That is your time to strike.
Yeah.
Don't sort of be like, great, see you next month or whatever. Know that you're now transitioning into, you can go close this person. And you can now like make that happen because you have to put in the effort. You have to willingly know that this is what it's going to take. And you sort of have to transition it in there. And yes, when we when we rented this place, we went through this whole deal process because Sriram just got overexcited about applying his like deal tactics.
This is going to be great content for the podcast. Yeah, so that is why I'll tell you about it.
And it was like hundreds of messages back and forth between us where Sriram would just be like, I put this offer, let's see what he says, and then I'm going to negotiate for this other thing and all of that. But I think knowing is half the battle.
Yeah, so for example, let's say meeting a fantastic engineer and you've been meeting them for coffee for a year and a half or two, and they are, and I would say usually when somebody brings up this topic of, oh, I'm having, hey, for example, very key phrase to look for, I'm a little bit of a transition phase, or somebody would be like, I've been in this role for a while, or even better, I just hit a milestone birthday, I just turned 30, right? Like, those are all signifiers that they are interested, right? Like, they are interested. They want to be winding down, they are interested. They would not be here if they're not interested. And you got to pick up on those cues, and you got to make the overture, which means that you got to say, okay, you know what? Like, no pressure, but why don't you come in for a few conversations, meet a few of them, right? And, you want to do it in a way where it doesn't feel too heavyweight, but you also think like, okay, we want to take this to the next step and see what this is there. Or this could mean, for example, let's say you're a company, you say, hey, you know what? I know you're not exactly looking to sell right now, but why don't we kick the tires, right? Come in, meet some folks, have a few conversations, let's have a meet. And I would say 85-90% of the time, that is what they want. But they don't want to bring it up. So you got to actually...
it's almost a bad sign if they bring it up.
Yeah, a little bit of a dance.
Yeah, right? Like, it's almost like, I think people just don't talk about this enough, but there is this thing as like this overt signaling because it reeks of desperation.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do that in any part of this. Like, if it is a hire, the candidate shouldn't be like, are you looking to hire? I would like to join. You know that that's a bad sign. If you are a founder... do not go into meetings and say, I'm fundraising. Bad sign. Like, it just does not work that way. No matter what people tell you, they do not want to be told that you are doing X. Because that almost always means you have not been able to do X, and hence you're stating the obvious. And hence, you're probably, this is an adverse selection as far as the other side is concerned.
Yeah, but I'll just say, can I make a silly standpoint? I think some founders often hear they ask for advice, not for funding, and you get that too literally. Last year, I met a founder, and they kept repeating, I only want...
They
literally told me a phrase, I only want advice, I don't want to raise
I
funds.
just want to be like, shut up.
I did this 3 times, I was like, okay, so I'll give you some advice. And then at the end, somebody was like, actually, I was like, could you just tell me this, because
No.
Okay,
So,
this is a bit off topic.
yeah, it's not off topic. I do think, in case of fundraising or in case of closing a candidate, in case of any deal, this overt interest, I think it really does make you feel like, wow, they seem desperate. I wonder what's wrong. And you never want to trigger that part of it.
Yeah.
Whether, on the other side is an investor or as a hiring manager or somebody who's looking for an apartment or whatever. It's like, I really want this house. You're like, what happened to your previous place?
Yes.
You just want a sense of like, they're cool, they're stable, things are okay, they have options. And it needs to be sort of this is a win-win on both sides.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't feel like that. But I actually agree with the ask for advice if you're fundraising, but I do think there are some founders who will go completely over where, I do think you need to figure out how to land the point after all the advice seeking and stuff, where you sort of have to be like, this is great. As we implement all of this, or are we doing this, we're making like X amount in MRR or whatever, just showcase your vanity stats, talk about the things that are going well, be like, we do this opportunistically. I think we're going to have to like do a fundraise at some point, like whatever is the time down the road. At that point, I would love to come back to you if there is interest. Just say that, do the thing. So it at least helps the other side be like, aha, okay, like they will come talk to me. That's great, because every investor wants to be talked to.
Yes.
when there is like a fundraise on the horizon. Same with the candidate. In X number of months, I'm going to do this. I'm going to hit that. There is like this timeline. Whenever the timing is right, I would love to come chat with you. If there is like a fit in the role or opportunity, great. But you have to sort of put yourself out there on the other side as well.
Yeah. I want to get back to our point about deal speed and momentum, because, and it's one of the things where when there's speed in a deal, you can feel it. And when there isn't, you can feel it. In personal ways. Just to make concrete examples again, when you're in a hiring process and the hiring process energy, you feel it. I'll give you an example. the hiring manager, or whoever outside is texting you. They're like, hey, I already had a chat with this, right? Oh, you're meeting X and Y. I'm very happy that you're meeting X and Y. Or, maybe you're flying different city. How's your stay? Do you want me to send you restaurant recommendations, right? You feel the momentum and energy. But on the other hand, if something's like, there's no energy, you're like, you worked for them 2 days ago. Are you like, am I supposed to email them? Are they going to email me? What's the deal? Like, you don't know that. Or in an acquisition process, right? It should always be clear what the next step is. So when going through any M&A, people are like, oh, we hung out in this room with the backers. If it's a large acquisition or with your team, we're meeting tomorrow. Oh, by the way, the principals, which is maybe the CEOs or the leaders or either side, are grabbing this dinner. And great. There should be something every single day.
Right.
And you should be like every day you're making progress, right? You're converging on a result, either yay or nay, or usually some negotiation of some kind. And this has to happen within a matter of days. So like if Facebook can buy WhatsApp for what's the number, like 18 billion? If that can happen over 10 days, you can close a hire within 10 days, right? Like, so, and if it's over a couple of weeks, this probably not going to happen. I would say target 48 to 72 hours. If you really want something, 48 to 72 hours.
So I guess if you're on the side of the hiring manager, if you are the person who's trying to hire a candidate or trying to close the deal, right? What should you do to signal momentum?
I think, okay, some few tricks, I would say. Number one is some stuff we said last episode, which is just tell them literally what the process is going to be. Say, we're going to meet X, Y, and Z at this time. At this time, we'll follow up. We'll have a conversation. Make sure somebody is chaperoning them through the process. But it's also true for acquisitions. The way, for example, when I was one of these companies, you'd buy a company, we'd be like, okay, we're going to set up this conference room. There'll be a code name. It'll be a little secretive, maybe a little far away in the building. You come in, you hang out there, you're going to meet X, Y, and Z through the day. Some of them are going to be lawyers, the finance people, then you're going to go for dinner and blah, blah. And you know exactly what the thing is going to be. So that just tells you the rhythm and the structure. So then you can, so that is the protein. That is the bare basics. I also think the other thing which is very important is to have a back channel. We had Emil Michael on the show last a little while ago, and he had a fantastic episode which we should link to here. On part of it was talked about doing these amazing big deals. For example, launching over in China, partnering with TD, and one of the things he would do is he would go talk to his counterpart, Gene, and he would go talk to her every single day because they both had these teams of people, and you check it out, hey, are we okay? And so I think having a little bit of a back channel with the other person outside of the official channel is important. So, for example, if you are running a negotiation with teams on either side, then you want to have a text thread where you're like, hey, Matt, it's been a long day. What are you doing? Do you want to grab a drink? And where you're just not talking about the thing, we're talking about something else, but you're building social rapport and because somebody's feeling upset or unhappy, it tells you that you get a read. For example, that person may not be the only stakeholder. They may need to convince their board, their investors, their employees, and you get a read of where they are. If it is an individual and it's an individual hire, then you want to have a thing about like, okay, hey, you just want to interview, maybe want to grab dinner or something else. So you want to have a little bit of a back channel conversation outside of the formal conversation. So people feel like, oh, even if I'm not hearing because their analysts are running the numbers or the HR person scheduling the next meeting, I still got good because I'm still getting texts from this person all the time or grab a drink. So I think the back channel, the checking in is important.
Yeah, I agree. I think having a separate channel, separate route of communication, I think is really important. Also, I think having something common that is not the deal to talk about. So you sort of like, and it doesn't have to be something like, the weather or whatever, but find some points of commonality that you can go engage with them on so that they feel like they sort of know you as a person, right? It can't just be, we're here to talk about the deal, we're going to go close this thing kind of thing, but it has to be something that is like, an industry event or something that might be like slightly outside your, the deal making scope to be able to bring them together. Because at the end of the day, there is you with your emotions, with your pressures, you as a human being trying to do this structured contract with this other person who's also a human being who's maybe having like not a great time at home or something, and you sort of have to like figure out a bond and that also has to be real and authentic. It can't be this forced. I hate it when people start like talking about like the weather or whatever. Nobody gives a shit. Like, I don't know how they do it. It's like, did you see it's like raining outside? Like, okay, sure, it's raining outside. Be like, I really despise those. It is just not. It's not.
You know, by the way, every founder or person that haven't brought up the weather with Aarthi is going to be like, oh shit.
No, I don't mean. Yeah,
You know who you are.
I don't mean it that way. It's just like, it's not real. Like, I know you're trying to like build this relationship. Just do that. For us, it might be something like, I watched this other episode, and a lot of people do that. And I saw this thing. I saw this like billboard in the airport, like things like that, which I think it's so random. It's like,
Yes, but I think it's real art. The small talk without having it be obvious is art.
I agree.
But I think you make a point which I want you to talk about, which is Emil's talked about. You have to know everything about the deal.
Yeah.
And I think part of knowing the person, you have to talk more about that. Like, what does it mean?
Yeah, Emil said this really well, where when you walk into a room and you have that other person, in whichever context, you have to know everything. And it is one of my favorite pieces of advice, because it sounds so obvious in retrospect, but a lot of the people don't put in the work going into the room. And this means, what is it in there for them in this room? Why are they doing this deal? What are their incentives? Who are they reporting to? Who is this person? What are their interests? Where do they live? Like, you sort of like need to know this person and the context in which you are meeting them. And I genuinely think, as simplistic as it sounds, many people just don't put in the time and the effort to go do that. And they sort of show up, and I see a lot of founders do this, where they show up and founders have this very big sense of, you're working on this company, this problem for 18, 20 hours a day, probably sleep deprived, and you sort of come into this like alternate reality where you think your problem is everybody else's problem and you don't really need to care about other people. And I could not tell you it's quite literally the opposite. Nobody gives a shit about you as a founder. It is just not about like your company and your problem space, especially when you're first starting out small. So you have to put in the work and the effort to know everything about this person or the one who's sitting there in that room.
Yeah, I think it's very apparent, by the way, when somebody has done the homework or not. For example, if you're meeting a potential partner or VC firm, before you walk in the meeting, you should know the entire org dynamics, right?
Yeah.
The person you're meeting, do they have power? Do they not have power, right? Like, who do they hate? Who do they like? Do they have the power to make this transaction happen? What gets them promoted? How, are they on the way up or down in the organization? What are they responding to? And people may think this is hard, but trust me, if you're not able to figure this out, your chance of making this thing happen are going to go dramatically down. So, for example, in some of these M&A transactions I was talking about, these CEOs knew that, okay, these companies are going to face pressure to own this vertical stack. There are only n number of companies. So they knew that, okay, I could put myself up here because this person is probably going to get an email from their boss being like, hey, what are we doing? Because the industry seems to be going this way, right? So unless you have full context of the people you're dealing with, you're really going to struggle. We see a landscape, for example, is very easy to think about, okay, this partner, do they think about this space? How do they think about this space, right? Yeah. Look at every single tweet, blog post, podcast they have done. What they
background, their resume, like what have they done? If you look them up on LinkedIn or wherever, oftentimes I'll see people be like, oh, you did that, you worked on this thing, and you're like, wait, but it would have taken you 20 seconds.
No, those are the basics, right? Like, I think the more interesting part, I would say, is, if you're not doing that, you just fired it. If you're not looking at the other person's LinkedIn and you don't know that by the last 100 tweets by heart, they just are doing a basic job. But I think the more interesting thing is you've talked to everybody around you, and they know exactly who you like, who you're getting along with, who you're not getting along with, how are you doing organization. They know it backwards and forwards. Very, very important. For example, because the person you're dealing with may not have all the power. They have a board. They have other stakeholders, investors. Which means if you know that you can help them. For example, you could say, hey, okay, so I know you have an investor. You need to get over the line. What if I get my CEO or investor to go talk to your investor, so it's going to help you, right? So basically what you're trying to say, you're trying to figure out all the things that are objections and roadblocks, and you're trying to get them out of the way. But unless you knew, sometimes we had acquisitions where one of the investors was a very strong personality, but we knew that investor needed something else. So you'd be like, hey, we'll go talk to them, right? And because but unless you knew that picture, you could not do that. Sometimes it's personal. I always remember the story. And it's sort of in this book called E-Boys, which is about original years of eBay and the early years of Benchmark. And they tried to hire Meg Whitman as CEO of eBay. She's doing something. I think she was in Metal at the time. And it's very hard because eBay is kind of this, they're selling pest dispensers and baseball cards, and she has a great job, and she has to move. And I think, I forget who did it. I think it's Pierre Romidia or the Benchmark crew or some combination. What they do is they try and figure out, okay, how do you get a school for Meg's kid, I think as a daughter, right? How do you get a school for her, right? Like, how do you make sure like her spouse has a thing? At one time, I think they tried to set a daughter for a date. So, they're trying to do the whole 360-degree view because they need to something else, because unless you know who are all the other influences, right? Like the spouse, significant other, right? Like you don't have the full 360 picture.
Yeah. I mentioned this specifically on the other side of the startup founder. And, this is a mistake I used to make too, where I would assume that everybody just knew what I was building, what I was doing, what my needs were, the problem statement, everything. And I would make this mistake where I would go into rooms and just assume that they all knew everything about what I was building. And it was really like the thing that I realized much later, it was on me to first educate them, to get them to know all of these, but also like really read the room, understand incentive structures, especially when you're like fundraising, for example.
Yeah.
Who gets to make the decision? Is it this person who you're pitching to? Are there going to be other pitches? What do they need to know? What do they need to see? What kind of checks are they writing? Is it more in the sense of, are they interested in the space at all, or are they like absolutely not?
Yeah, I think all this is important because people know they need to do this. I think the hard part is how. So the best way is just gather intelligence. So like, for example, if you're talking to a VC firm, and go talk to every founder that you can meet who is raised from them, and ask them like, hey, what do you think of the firm, your partner, their partner, what have you heard? Go find their ex-employees on LinkedIn, email them. And if you meet up like a dozen people, you will start forming very quickly a view of the place, right? The culture, the dynamics. And it's not going to maybe assure you getting things done. It's going to help your cause. Same thing with a senior executive, right? Like if you don't have close to senior executive, I want you to meet their colleagues, as part of the reference checks, meet their spouse. If it's very important, one of my smartest founders, he does this all the time, and I'm always so impressed, right? He will fly out and he'll always grab dinner with the person and their significant other, like, usually a spouse or, they want to hire someone slightly older people who are often married. And you always do that. Always works, right? Because one is when he watches the person he's trying to hire, the spouse, he understands him so much better, and then the spouse can sometimes be a champion for them to get a role. And so for me, I think people know they have to do this, they don't know how. So I would say the basic test is just go talk to a lot of people about the people you're trying to deal with, right?
Do your work, do your homework.
Yes, and starting with people is very key. If you're doing an M&A transaction, talking to other people they've acquired, talking to other people in the space, we just going to arm you a lot even before you walk into a meeting.
Yeah, makes sense. What did you do for our house?
The house is interesting because we had to let this place. We rented a couple of places. Let's see. So I would say it's a combination of things, right? We had this real estate. I'm trying to figure out how to make this relatable. We had a real estate agent, right? It was part of an agency, and then we had a seller, I guess the landlord that we want to rent from. We rent the place we live in London. And so I think the first thing we did was we were like, okay, so I don't know which person we were watching it, but I remember talking to I was like, okay, what is the agent incentivized by?
Yeah.
Anytime
you made a mistake, it's about like not understanding the intermediary's incentive, whether it is in this context of renting a house or in anything else. Because their incentives are almost always not the exact same as yours or on the other sides. For them, it is like, in this case, it turns out like, they are incentivized by just getting this done, closing the deal, and then like using the time to go find other people and other deals kind of thing. And being able to get that done.
So that was number one. The second part was just having a sense of how much competition we had. So for this house, we'd want rent. Like we would try and find out, okay, how many other people have come and visited, right? How many other offers do they have? And sometimes people may not tell you, so you got to figure out other ways. Maybe go talk to a neighbor, and you're like, hey, this place, how many people have come to, like here's this nerdy idiot couple showed up, and you're like, hey, this house next door, how many offers have you had? Or maybe you ask the agent, or usually there are ways to find out, by the way. Or you can be like, hey, I want to come back X, Y, and Z. Are the other people seeing it when they're open times? But you want to get a sense of, okay, who are the other people? Then you want to understand as much as you can about, in this case, the people you're getting it from. So, for example, the landlord, what are their incentives, right?
Yeah.
Are they, is it like an ancestral property and they want to be happy with it? They just want to make as much, money from it as possible.
Yeah.
Do they want stability, or do they want something else? So I think I usually try and figure out all of that. And then the second part of it is speed, which is every day I'm like texting them. I'm trying to feel like, hey, let's move this further along. And because what usually winds up happening is you get a burst of momentum. You're like, oh, hey, we want to do something. Let's do something. And then there is a bunch of paperwork and legalese, right? You got to get this approved, and we got to get a bunch of letters because we were new in the UK to prove that, we are, reasonable, law-abiding citizens that you can rent to. And so what usually happens, like those things get really bogged down and it kills momentum, or worse, you can lose it because somebody else is doing it faster than you. So I think you want to do two things. One is you want to stay on top of this as much as possible. By the way, making about real estate, but typical, say in M&A transaction, this is the due diligence, right? Somebody's like, give me the data room, and let's get some paperwork from you. You'll be amazed at how often acquisitions fall apart because people are so annoyed about the data room and the stuff you need. But then you have a real problem, right? Because you need that. You need the due diligence. We need to prove to the UK that we're not criminals or whatever, right? You need that. So this is where the back channel I think is very interesting. So, for example, let's say there's a due diligence data room happening, and you're getting like a financial colonoscopy. And then on the other hand, you're back to like grabbing drinks, you're having a chat, you're helping visualize the future. You as a buyer be like, hey, listen, we're going through this process, I get it. But listen, let's plan, right? You're part of this company, 6 months down the road, how's this going to be, right? What are we going to do in terms of like, what are your goals, ambitions? How do you want to set up the team? What do you want to do? So you want to have to always kind of focus on the next day, right? I don't know whether you can do that rental place, but you want to have a back channel so you're not stuck with this unfun part of the process you're always going through.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. What mistakes do you see? We covered a bunch already. When you talk to, say, candidates, or you're in any part of a deal, any sort of partnership setup, what do you often see on the other side when you're like, that's a mistake, you shouldn't be doing that?
Good. I think losing momentum is definitely a big part of it.
Yeah.
I would say how often people will blow up a very good transaction for them over a small detail, because
What's an example? Just
it could be a minor financial thing. For example, it could be like, at the end minute, the founders want a slightly different payout. Right? And I'm not saying the right or wrong. It's negotiation. There's always like, the right answer is the one that gets it done. Or in a house, it's like, by the way, you can only, we want this extra certification. And I think what winds up happening is people locked into this thing. And they wind up like forgetting the bigger transaction they really needed. There's a lot of friction, because, you're kind of pummeling each other with this. And then you're going to it becomes a little bit of an ego thing where like, I don't want to give in on this point. And then it really all falls apart. I've seen this fall apart like so many times.
because of some small details, some inane thing, basically.
It's not, I would not say it's inane. It matters, but it doesn't matter as much as it, if you kind of, maybe in a month before or a month later, you were like, well, would this do this even if you could not live without that? You be like, yeah, absolutely. Right? But I think in the moment you get,
You're blowing up the deal.
yeah, people get somehow they wind up blowing up deals or things that are maybe meaningful but not enough to blow up the deal over.
And just losing sight of the bigger picture, which is it. You have to close this deal.
Yes. And so in the first question is like, well, how do you handle that, right?
Right.
You can't say, oh, by the way, emotionally, just be smarter about it.
Yeah.
I think a few tricks. One is like any sort of negotiation, people will tell you, like, for example, somebody wants X dollars and you want to do, Y dollars, right? The answer is, you can just butt heads, whatever. The often the right answer is to give it a different framing where you can say, well, I'll give you maybe, X dollars, but I'll give you X dollars plus maybe this deferred compensation, what's equity or different title. So you want to have pieces to move around. Otherwise, it becomes purely, well, one of us.
Yes versus no.
Yeah, X versus no, and then meet in the middle rarely makes anybody happy. So that's one. The other part is I would say is I think there is great power in ambiguity. And I remember reading this book on diplomacy once, right? And I should hunt it down. And it said some of the greatest sort of treaties or land disputes are often done where there's a lot of things which are undefined, right? And what they do is they kind of put like a marker of TBD, right? Will be decided later. Because it turns out that, like, for example, right, like, you're trying to, a lot of historical, maybe bad examples, but let's say you're like, well, we're going to negotiate this thing and, this country is going to get X, whether Y, other country is going to get Y. And by this, but there's one little border town and, we're going to figure it out. And with that, there's no easy way to get an answer on this because both countries don't have full power, by the way. They have like the constraints. So the right thing to do is to leave it ambiguous, right? Right? And be like, it'll be defined at a future time, right?
Why?
Because in the limited amount of energy and time that you have to get a transaction done, you don't have time to answer all the questions, right? So what you want to do is you want to give enough of air cover to say, hey, this thing is going to get done, and basically punt the problem to a future date.
Into a future person.
Into a future person. But the important thing is like, but that future person will not be trying to construct the whole thing, right? They would have maybe a year or many years of, oh, this partnership is great. Let's just kind of figure this one thing out. Way better context to deal with this. That, oh, you're trying to, answer 10 different points in negotiation, and this is one thing which both of us absolutely can't agree on, right?
Yeah.
And this one thing because it's causing friction could put all the other 10 things at risk. So I actually think, I have argued a lot of people take industry. Often we deal with preciseness, but I think if you look at historically at diplomacy and international, there's a lot of vagueness, right? Because vagueness means, for example, right? Maybe, neither side wants to be seen as losing a deal. Right, so you give it air cover, right? Like you say, you let the other side save face in any number of ways. So there are a lot of things that can be done. So I think, for example, one trick is say, okay, this will be determined at an agreeable time by both parties.
Exactly. Maybe, yeah. So I got very uncomfortable when you said like the whole, it have like vagueness, because to me that's like, then what's even the point? I in principle I see these like, this deal is so complex that you don't want this like one small thing that you just cannot agree on within this time frame. It's just going to lose steam. You just have to like close this. I get that. But you also see this like unintended consequence of like that small footnote thing just not being decided as a part of this and just dragging on for a long time after. So maybe one thing to do is to just cap it and say by this time frame we have to figure out all these other open questions or something of that sort. Because the moment you say it's okay to leave it sort of vague, I'm like, no, let's not do that. Like I'm very much in the.
Well, you have to wait because there is no way within a 5-day, for example, right? Let's say buy a company like WhatsApp, right? You have 6 days. You got to figure out everyone's compensation, titles, where will they work, what technology stack will they use, the number of questions.
Sure.
And some of this matter, some of this don't matter. There's just not enough time to figure all of this out.
Yeah.
And anyone could easily blow it up. So you need vagueness, right? But you can't, sometimes it comes around because you want both sides to save face also, which is also important.
One thing.
Vagueness is good.
I don't know. Just, getting emotional. And I've seen a fair share of this, and I'm sure you have too, on both sides of this deal, right? Like the one who's like trying to hire someone or close this partnership or raise money or invest in. You just see this across the board where you let your emotions play, and that is almost always a bad idea. You sort of have to, and it's one of those things where, again, in retrospect, it sounds like, oh yeah, of course, like don't get emotional. It also sort of comes with age and maturity, I think, where you've seen a few of these and you sort of like get a sort of a framework on how to handle them. But getting emotional in any way, which is like overt sort of like anger, unhappiness, exuberance, like I think all of these are sort of this like weird tell where it's like you just know that that's sort of a weakness.
But is that really true? Because it feels to me like these big transactions get done because somebody's really enthusiastic about it. It needs this person, let's say.
It is different from like getting overtly emotional.
Well, there's also a personal component, right? Like, for
Yeah.
example, you're dealing, even if it's successful, right? They do a number of these big transactions with, they try and buy newspaper, etc. Right? Like this, one of the best scenes is when they get the matriarch of the family to give them $1 billion number, even though she has money is not important. But so there's real human emotion involved in these relationships. And then let's say, for example, you do all this, and in the end, they're like, well, we want this different number than that X number, right? So I feel like emotions really play a big part of it.
I think the person who's able to keep it together and control their emotions as much as possible is the one who's going to win. If you truly see this as a game to be played, and you just want to like get to the finish line, you sort of have to figure out how to keep your cool. I've been in a fair share of these like conversations as a founder where a fundraising conversation has not gone well, or they're giving you some piece of feedback or some comment, or these sort of patterns really used to bother me, which is like you sort of feel like strung along as a founder, where it's like, oh, this is amazing. This is kind of the company we've been looking to invest, like perfect size, perfect round, perfect sort of like equity stake. How much is like, do you take in check size? Like they make you believe that there is like a finish line here. And then, if it falls apart for whatever reason, you have to just keep it together. Like you just have to move on and sort of see it as like, it's a process, it's fine, there will be more, and not sort of like get really deflated about it, not just be so like bothered in it in the room. Like outside the room, you can do whatever you want, but when you're in there and, it's like that final meeting when it's like a pass or whatever, keep your shit together. And I think getting emotions in the way is almost always a tell or sign of weakness.
Yeah.
And I see this from an investor standpoint as well. I see this from like a person who's trying to hire. There is something that triggers them, something you would have said that they don't agree with, or that like recall some different bad memory for them.
Yep.
And it pisses them off. And that there's like a downward spiral. Just keep it together.
Yeah, I think this is a couple of maybe ways around this. I remember negotiating with the founder a few years ago, and they really wanted something, some deal point or something in the term sheet.
Yeah.
It was really frustrating, and because it was not financial or meaningful. But I think your point, like what, from my perspective, that thing that they were asking for had often led to some really, really bad things for companies. And so we kind of went back and forth on it. And ultimately, I wound up asking them, why do you really want this?
Yeah.
And they made up this scenario where, like, in this particular case, like, there were these, there were like more than one founder, and they were like, well, in case, one of us, like, disagree or whatever, we want to have this provision. And I was like, oh, okay, in that case, well, here's an alternative way which can handle the same thing and make people happy. So often, I think what winds up happening is until you get to the source of the motivation, and again, not to repeat ourselves, but this is why knowing the 360-degree view is really important. You can't actually figure out how to give in something to them. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, maybe, one of the employees wants a particular title, right? Like, and...
or had been promised that.
Or been promised that, right? Like, or...
It's like to know everything, ask a bunch of questions, just...
Their own bathrooms, nobody else uses.
Yeah.
This is a real big quote.
It is a real.
It's a particular reference.
But yeah, I think, look, this is the hardest part, right? Like human beings dealing with each other and trying to figure out how to make each other happy, but also get what you want and being able to walk away feeling like, aha, I did it, I got it. And you sort of have to like, figure out all the key pieces of information, know everything, not get stressed out about it. Keep it
Move as fast as possible.
Move as fast as possible. Close the deal. Get it done. One other thing I'd like to add in there, since we're talking about very pithy things, is being persistent. This has actually worked for me where, even when the investor said no, I would go back after a few months. I would go back after some time. And after a few months or whatever the period of time, there is this cool off period after which you can always like go re-engage. And I've been able to like go get funding or go convince somebody, after a good amount of time has passed between us, because if you truly listen to them and they give you like a very good piece of feedback and you're able to work on it, then it is almost like this honor code on both sides.
Yeah, but that really works in the fundraising context. Like, once I was rented, you're not getting a house back, or that person gets a new job, you're not getting that back either.
If it's not a clear no, I sort of think it is like a maybe.
Yeah, but maybe the next job. I think, well, the person is important because I think persons also gives a long-term thing, right? Like, for example, like maybe this person didn't say yes when you wanted to hire them, but then a year later,
close all the doors.
Yeah. But maybe this is a great segue, which is if it doesn't work out, you want to make sure you leave it on good terms, because something else may happen to bring it back up. Like so many great M&A deals in history never happened the first time; they happened the second go around. Somebody wasn't hired the first round, but they're like, it's not for me. I don't want to leave my current role. But a year later, the manager annoyed them again. And then they're like, well, I'm out, right? And so you want to be like, well, we're going to leave on good terms. It's not for us right now, but let's come back and do this.
Yep, exactly. And make it really clear. The timing isn't right. It's not you as a person. Or be very clear on that feedback or why I didn't want to join this company. Why is this not the thing? Like leave on a really good terms. And make it really clear, but open that line of communication, keep that warm, so that sometime down the road, you never know. You never know that how these opportunities may all open up.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of sums up a lot of it. I think Aarthi says, and I've heard about this, but like you can apply these philosophies in so many different parts of life. Yeah. Getting kids into school, renting a house, right? Getting that, person to
have these very specific middle-aged kind of problems.
Yeah, I mean, somebody was asking me relationship advice the other day, and I was like, "Close the deal." Right? Like, I like, put a ring on it, right? Like, so just
I hope you did not say that.
I did. I very much did. Right? Like, though I think, I don't know, maybe that's not exactly the other, but I would say it's true for. I think moving fast, knowing to where to swoop in. Having a back channel. I think all deals go through a time when it seems like it's going to shit and it's going to blow up. Getting past that, leaving the door open because it's not now, it could be someday in the future, right? It will work out.
I think yes, exactly. Have faith, it'll work out. And to Sriram's point, even though this sort of seems like, wow, okay, I'm not hiring an exec right now, or I'm not doing this exact thing. You will be surprised at how often you will apply a lot of these in just like normal day-to-day life. It surprised us. We've also been sort of fortunate to go sit beside people who've done good deals or had the fortune of doing it ourselves. And I wish when we were a lot younger earlier in our careers, people actually told us, there's going to be a time when you're going to have to like deploy these skills or think about these in a different way. At least for me, I wish I had that when I was starting companies and doing all of that, because, M&A, like for me, my M&A, I had to like fail a bunch of times and just go learn. And I just hope that some slice of this, some sliver of this is useful to, to some part of your day-to-day life or professional life in some way.
Love it. Well, that's all we had. Hope you folks enjoyed this. We had a fun time doing this episode, and until next time.